Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Jamaica removed from Financial Action Task Force grey list. Court of Appeal reserves judgment in Director of Public Prosecution DPP retirement age case. And later in sports, action continues on day 2 of National Junior and Senior Championships. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shane Masters and here are the details. The Financial Action Task Force has removed Jamaica from its grey list of countries that are assessed as having deficiencies in their anti-money laundering countering the financing of terrorism regimes. The action came today at the Task Force plenary in Singapore. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark, who led a delegation to the Task Force meetings this week, said the organization welcomed Jamaica's significant progress in improving its AML-CFT regime. Dr. Clark says the task force release further stated that Jamaica strengthened the effectiveness of its AML-CFT regime to meet the commitments in its 13-point action plan regarding the strategic deficiencies that the organization identified in February 2020. As such, the task force concluded that Jamaica is no longer subject to its increased monitoring process. Dr. Clark says Jamaica is committed to building on the achievement of being removed from the Financial Action Task Force grey list and remain up to date with the latest global standards in the AML, CFT, and countering the proliferation of terrorism spaces. The Court of Appeal has reserved judgment in the Director of Public Prosecution DPP retirement age case. Now it says it will hand down a ruling early in the next court term, which begins September 23. The Court of Appeal has been hearing arguments on the constitutionality of the act that extended the retirement age of the Director of Public Prosecutions and Auditor General. Attorneys for the government has defended the action of the administration to amend the law, stating that the act is valid as it did not require the support of the opposition to be passed. Now, the People's National Party had challenged the constitutionality of the amended legislation in the Constitutional Court. The court had ruled that the procedure for increasing the age was lawful, but struck down the section that would have allowed the incumbent DPP, Paul Lulin, to retire early with full benefits. Based on the findings of a court, Ms. Lulin stepped down as director while the matter is under appeal. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says plans are in place to hire health workers from overseas to staff the Cornwall Regional Hospital, which is currently being renovated. It comes as the World Health Organization announced that by 2030, the world needs to train another 18 million healthcare workers in order to keep up with demands. At the official launch of a global health initiative at the UWI Mona, Dr. Tufton says part of the ministry's strategy is to forge partnerships. He pointed to a recent MOU signed with the Philippines.
One, we're going to send some of our trainees there for clinical rotation if we don't have enough space here, starting with our specialist nurses. We're going to exchange faculty to increase the ratio of faculty to student. So faculty from Philippines are willing to come here or to utilize technology to increase that cadre. And thirdly, the last but by no means the least option, we're going to recruit. We're going to hire Filipino workers, healthcare workers to come so that when we build our hospitals, we don't have an issue as we do now. We do that with Cuba. We have over 300 Cubans here now that are in our system, most of them nurses. We signed an agreement 3 months ago with Nigeria. We have had Nigerian nurses here before, and there are discussions now with India and so on.
The government has signed MOU with Cuba and Nigeria while discussions are underway with India. Now, Dr. Tufton also shared details of a $2.5 billion scholarship program to train healthcare workers.
$500 million a year for the next 5 years. That starts in September. Next month, thank you. Next month, we will advertise in the paper, full page ads, all the categories of healthcare that we are willing to offer these scholarships to. And it could be people currently studying, people planning to study, and it could be studying here, studying elsewhere.
Despite efforts to improve customer care in hospitals, it continues to be a significant concern. These complaints range from long wait times to dismissive staff. But Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says that the Health Ministry has put mechanisms in place to strengthen the process of airing grievances and pursuing investigations.
The reality is that we have now a challenge, having spent so much money and are spending so much, to achieve a change management function within not even public health, but the public service. And I do believe that there is a systemic issue within government where sometimes we take our customers, our clients, for granted.
While progress has been made, Dr. Tufton says he recognizes too that significant work needs to be done to address customer care in public health facilities.
We still have to work on showing greater levels of empathy, greater responsiveness and sensitivities to people's concerns, because more often than not, the irritation that is accompanied by the vocal expressions of disappointment are caused and triggered by very simple issues that could have been overcome by just a listening ear.
Information Minister Dr. Dana Morris-Dixon says bullying on social media can have a debilitating effect, not just on the average Jamaicans, but politicians too. Senator Morris-Dixon says politicians are not immune to the harmful effects of online bullying. She says a constant barrage of negative comments, personal attacks, and harassment can take a toll on their mental health and well-being.
The question really should be, should a government not protect its democracy and protect its institutions from lies? And that's what's really the conversation. And I've seen some individuals try to change the narrative to make it seem as if there is some kind of dictatorial type element to it, when there is not any of that. There is obviously openness to dissent. That's what a democracy is about. And we hold to those democratic ideals really, really strong.
She calls on individuals to fact-check information before sharing and to cease personal attacks on social media.
It's a question we have to ask ourselves. What is the Jamaica that we want? What kind of Jamaica do we want? We hold high certain ideals, but at the same time, we have to hold the ideal of truth strong. And that's what our government is saying. And it's a conversation we're going to have. And as I said, we're starting with educating people how to know what's true, what's not, sending them to you and your media hosts and your group, saying, go to traditional media, verify it, check if it is true.
In a TVJ News follow-up, an American citizen is seeking compensation this afternoon for injuries she says she received following the American Airlines flight, which veered off the runway at the Norman Manley International Airport. Now, the flight, which was returning to Jamaica from Miami, landing over an hour after it was scheduled due to bad weather. Most passengers described being frightened, and the plane's engine as well as landing lights were damaged. But Sonia says she had to seek medical attention when she arrived in Jamaica.
I went to get out of bed, and I couldn't even turn my head. Everything was just stiff and from being shaken up. And I was like, wow, I hurt. And so then I called to the lady who I was staying with. She was a Jamaican lady. And she said, oh, you must have whiplash. And I had whiplash many years ago, so I know what it feels like. And I just felt stiff, and I thought, well, I just need to rest this, and I'm going to call the airlines and see if they'll pay for a massage.
She says efforts to contact the airline has also proved futile. TVJ News also sought a written response from American Airlines, but up to news time, a response was not forthcoming.
To have someone that people can talk to, especially if there's a crash or an incident like this, there needs to be a number that people can call. You cannot say that there's no injuries reported when you can't get a hold of anyone.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us, more stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. Executive Director of the National Solid Waste Management Authority, Audrey Gordon, says the Jamaican should expect better garbage collection services across the island. His pronouncement comes as the authority has received over 150 new trucks to carry out its duties. Details in this report. Speaking in Falmouth, Trelawney on Thursday, where additional garbage trucks were handed over, Mr. Gordon said the NSWMA no longer has the ability to blame the lack of trucks for any garbage crisis across the country.
The only problem we have now is how we're going to manage, and that is where we have to challenge ourselves as an agency to deliver on behalf of the people, because we are now equipped so to do. All of us must together ensure that the investment made in the authority by the taxpayer, by the government, that it is honored, that the people get a return on their investment.
Again, Mr. Gordon is imploring Jamaicans to dispose of their garbage properly. He says too often citizens throw their garbage on the streets after consuming an item.
That's the careless littering that create all these unsightly mess along our roadway. But more, when it rains and we are in the hurricane season now, those waste that are littered wantonly across the country, it rides in the water and end up in your waterway and clog up your drain and cause the flooding and the destruction that we have.
In the meantime, vendors in the Falmouth market will also be getting a reprieve from the unsightly scenes of garbage. In a joint partnership with the Trelawney Municipal Corporation, the NSWMA on Thursday carried out a cleanup operation at the bend-down section of the market. According to Chairman of the corporation, Colin Gager, that area will now go under some renovation to make it more aesthetically pleasing to shoppers and vendors alike.
We will be spending about maybe $12.5 million to renovate some areas, bathrooms, you name it. And the garbage collection site is included in that. We will be removing the site from this location, putting it at the other end where you have the exit.
The NSWMA Executive Director says in a bid to assist with the cleanliness of the market, an additional 3 garbage skips will be placed in the market, bringing the total to 6. And it's now time for the Business Minute.
3 aircraft which operated for the now defunct regional airline LEAT 1974 are being sold to the government of Antigua and Barbuda. The Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, made the revelation in a news release on Thursday. The Antiguan government is currently starting up operations for a new airline called LEAT 2020. Earlier this year, LEAT 1974 ceased operating after entering administration in 2020. LEAT 1974, which was operated by the governments of Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, borrowed funds from the CDB to purchase these planes. The bank says an aircraft sale agreement has been executed between the administrator for LEAT 1974 as the seller and the government of Antigua and Barbuda as the buyer. CDB says under the agreement, the shareholder agreed that money from the sale should be proportionally allocated towards paying outstanding balances on the CDB loans that were initially made to the shareholder governments to support LEAT 1974 Limited's operations. Currently, the CDB says it is not involved in the financing or any aspect of the operations of LEAT 2020. Further afield, more than 3 million passengers are expected to be screened on Friday. That's according to the U.S. Transportation Security Administration, TSA. If that happens, it would make it the busiest travel day ever, surpassing the previous record set Sunday with 2.99 million individuals screened. The Independence Day holiday started Thursday and lasts through Monday, July 8. TSA expects to screen 32 million people during that period. That's a 5.4% increase over the 2023 Independence Day holiday travel week. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Hal Shane Burke.
Time now for the top regional and international stories.
in the region. The Caribbean will soon have access to a $250,000 special fund to assist in the goal of reducing its food imports by 2025. The creation of the fund was announced by Director General of the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, Manuel Otero. The special fund will be geared at promoting initiatives and actions aimed at assisting countries in the region in meeting the goal of reducing their multi-million-dollar food import bill by 25% by 2025. On the international scene, Joe Biden gave a stumbling performance in a 90-minute showdown with Donald Trump, the first televised debate of the 2024 presidential election. Democrats expressed concern at the president's performance, with party insiders saying his early answers triggered panic. Top Biden allies said his campaign team overworked the president, and senior White House officials said they're meeting to discuss options. And a powerful 7.2 magnitude earthquake shook parts of southern Peru early Friday morning. It was centered about 600 kilometers southeast of the capital city of Lima. Residents say the quake was very long and strong enough to shake them from their beds. Officials say no deaths have been reported. The earthquake initially triggered a tsunami warning, but the threat has since passed. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Nakinsky Robinson.
And we head to a quick break. When we come back, Jermaine Brown will have your midday sports report.